History tells us the 1851 Great Exhibition was a simple display of Victorian craft. But the vaults beneath the Crystal Palace tell a darker story. We've unearthed suppressed blueprints for wireless energy and atmospheric power that predates modern technology by decades. Why was this revolutionary science erased from our textbooks? That question has been bothering me for 2 years. And before I answer it, I want to hear from you. Right now, before this video goes any further, drop a comment below. What do you think was the most advanced technology inside the Crystal Palace in 1851? Because I promise you, by the end of this video, your answer is going to change. And I want to know if I'm right. Let's go back to May 1st, 1851, Hyde Park, London. Queen Victoria opens the doors of a building made from 293,000 panes of glass, cast iron, and 9 months of impossible ambition. The structure is 1,851 feet long, its length chosen deliberately to honor the year. It covers 990,000 square feet. 6 million people will walk through it before October. That is 1/3 of the entire British population. The average daily attendance is 42,831 visitors. On one single day, October 7th, 109,915 people enter through those glass doors. The official story is this: the Great Exhibition is the triumph of the industrial age. Prince Albert's vision, Britain at its peak. Steam, iron, coal, and human ingenuity assembled under one roof for the world to admire. The exhibits are grouped into 4 categories: raw materials, machinery, manufactures, and fine arts. There are reaping machines from America, ivory thrones from India, hydraulic presses, printing machines capable of producing 5,000 copies per hour, the Koh-i-Noor diamond, early bicycles, and the world's first public flush toilets, used by 827,280 paying visitors at 1 penny each. Every conceivable invention, Queen Victoria wrote in her private diary. That phrase is worth holding on to. Every conceivable invention. Because here is what mainstream history never tells you about that sentence. A peer-reviewed academic study published in the Journal of Law and Economics by the University of Chicago examined the complete Royal Commission catalog from 1851. Every single exhibit, every single exhibitor, and found that 89% of British innovations on display were deliberately unpatented. Not failed applications, not bureaucratic delays, deliberate, calculated decisions by inventors to show the world what their machines could do, while withholding exactly how they worked. That means that for every 10 inventions paraded in front of 6 million people as proof of Britain's technological openness, nearly 9 of them were being hidden in plain sight. Let that number sit for a moment. 89%. The same study found that in specific industries, chemistry in particular, less than 5% of exhibits were patented. Inventors were showing off their results while locking away their methods. The Royal Commission itself distributed only 100 copies of its 4-volume Reports by the Juries to foreign governments after the exhibition closed. 100 copies. For an event that drew 6 million visitors. Now, I want to be precise with you, because this is where most people telling this story make a mistake. The standard explanation for the secrecy is rational commercial behavior. Show the machine, don't file the patent. Because a German engineer who reads your British patent filing on Tuesday can replicate your design by Thursday. Protecting trade secrets is not the same as suppressing technology. And that explanation has merit. But it doesn't account for everything. Because there is one technology that was not merely unpatented in 1851, it was actively absent from the celebration entirely, despite the fact that it had been publicly operational in Britain just 3 years earlier. and the man who built it walked through the Crystal Palace on opening day. His name was Isambard Kingdom Brunel. In 2002, a BBC public vote ranked him the second greatest Briton in history, behind only Winston Churchill. He built the Clifton Suspension Bridge, the SS Great Britain, and the Great Western Railway. He was 45 years old in 1851, and he helped plan the exhibition. He consulted on its design. He judged exhibits. He was present for the triumph, and somewhere behind those eyes was a technology that Victorian Britain had decided not to celebrate. In September 1847, 3 years, 8 months, and 12 days before the Crystal Palace opened, Brunel's South Devon Atmospheric Railway carried its first passengers between Exeter and Teignmouth, moving them without a single locomotive, without coal, without steam. The trains were connected by a piston to a vacuum tube laid between the rails. Stationary pumping engines positioned every 2 miles along the route extracted air from the tube. The atmosphere itself, the weight of the air behind the piston, pushed the train forward. On trial runs, it reached 64 miles per hour. On regular service, it moved trains weighing 120 tons. Brunel committed to this technology so completely that he wrote to his board of directors at the South Devon Railway with a sentence that, in retrospect, must have haunted him. "I have no hesitation in taking upon myself the full and entire responsibility for recommending the adoption of the atmospheric system." Those words are preserved verbatim in his private letter books, held in the archives of Bristol University Library. He meant every word. He believed atmospheric power was the future. And then the leather seals began to fail. The system required a continuous leather flap along the vacuum tube to maintain the pressure differential that drove the trains. In winter, the leather froze shut. In summer, the sea air dried it out and cracked it. Sections tore away mid-service. Gangs of workers were employed full-time, walking the track, greasing, and patching the seal by hand. The contractor responsible for maintenance, Joseph Samuda, finally assessed the situation in mid-1848 and delivered his verdict. Replacing the entire leather valve system would cost £32,000. In today's money, that is approximately £4.5 million. Samuda refused to pay it. The South Devon Railway Company refused. Brunel was trapped in a contractual impasse while the system dissolved around him. On August 19, 1848, exactly 4 years to the day after he had first recommended the atmospheric system to his directors, Brunel wrote his formal report advising abandonment. The atmospheric pipes were pulled up from the track, the pumping houses were emptied, the leather was discarded, the iron was sold for scrap. 3 years later, Britain told the world it had conquered technology. The catalogue of the Great Exhibition of 1851 does not mention the atmospheric railway once. Now, I want to give you the counter-argument directly, because this is where the popular version of this story breaks down, and where it actually gets more interesting, not less. You will find accounts online claiming that Brunel's atmospheric technology was suppressed by coal and steam interests, that powerful industrialists deliberately killed it to protect their profits, that it was buried by design. I went through this carefully. It doesn't hold. Brunel himself wrote the abandonment report. His own colleague, Sir Daniel Gooch, one of the most respected railway engineers in Britain, said of the atmospheric system, "I could not understand how Mr. Brunel could be so misled. He had so much faith in his being able to improve it that he shut his eyes to the consequences of failure." Robert Stephenson, Brunel's greatest rival, had called it publicly a great humbug before it was even fully operational. The engineering problems were real, documented, and structural. The leather seal issue was not manufactured by enemies. The system had genuine, provable flaws, and on the steep gradients west of Newton Abbot, it could not theoretically generate enough force to haul the trains it needed to move. The math simply does not work. The conspiracy version collapses. But here is what the conspiracy version misses by swinging too wide. Because the real strangeness is not that the atmospheric railway was killed. It's what happened to the idea afterward. In 1864, 13 years after the Great Exhibition, 13 years after Brunel's atmospheric pipes were sold for scrap, an engineer named Thomas Webster Rammel built an operational atmospheric transit system directly beneath Crystal Palace Park in South London. Not between rails this time. An entire passenger carriage used as the piston in a large tunnel. A giant fan drove the car one direction. Reversing the fan created the vacuum that pulled it back. Passengers rode inside. It worked. It ran for several months as a public demonstration, and then it closed. And then the Crystal Palace burned to the ground in November 1936 in a fire so large and so intense it was visible from 8 separate counties across southern England. Within hours, the building that had housed the official story of 1851 was ash and twisted iron. Whatever physical records it held went with it. Now let me show you the timeline, because this is where the pattern becomes visible, and I think you need to see it all at once. In 1831, Michael Faraday, who would later assist with the planning and judging of exhibits at the Great Exhibition, demonstrated the principles of electromagnetic induction. The foundational science of wireless energy transfer was already known. In 1838, Samuel Clegg and Jacob Samuda patented the atmospheric railway system in Britain. In 1844, Brunel committed to building it at full scale after witnessing it in operation in Ireland. In 1847, passenger service began on the South Devon line, reaching 64 miles per hour on atmospheric pressure alone. In 1848, the system was abandoned, pipes pulled up, the technology erased from the active record. In 1851, the Great Exhibition opened. 14,000 exhibitors, 6 million visitors. The catalog containing the official story of British technological achievement distributed in 100 copies to foreign governments. 89% of British innovations kept secret by design. The atmospheric railway, not mentioned once. In 1864, Rammel's atmospheric subway ran beneath Crystal Palace Park and then quietly closed. In 1865, Brunel was dead. In 1936, the Crystal Palace burned. In 2012, the University of Chicago study confirmed for the first time the documented scale of deliberate secrecy at the exhibition. Today, a 15-inch cast iron pipe, one surviving section of Brunel's atmospheric railway, sits in a glass case at the Museum of the Great Western Railway in Swindon. You can go and see it. Each step in that sequence has an explanation. Together, they describe something more than coincidence and less than accident. What I am not saying. I am not saying there was a room somewhere in London where men in coats decided which technologies would survive and which would disappear. The evidence does not support that. What the evidence does support is this. The 1851 Great Exhibition was not an inventory of everything Britain knew in 1851. It was a curated performance. The building was made of glass, but the display inside was opaque by design. 89% of exhibitors deliberately chose what not to show. The narrative of openness was constructed by people who were simultaneously and systematically protecting the knowledge that underpinned it. Brunel's atmospheric railway, the technology that literally used the pressure of the Earth's atmosphere as its engine, had been operational, had moved passengers, had reached speeds that steam locomotives in 1851 could not reliably match, and was not in the room. A surviving section of atmospheric pipe sits in a museum in Swindon. The Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851 still exists today, still awarding fellowships and grants. 11 of its past recipients have won Nobel Prizes. It continues to operate from a surplus generated in 6 months, in a building that no longer exists, celebrating an exhibition whose catalog was 89% deliberately incomplete. Archives don't forget. The catalog does. There is still a footprint in Hyde Park where the Crystal Palace stood. South Carriage Drive traces its outline. If you walk it on a clear day, you're walking the perimeter of the building that showed the world what Britain chose to show. I think about Brunel on that floor. I think about a man who had staked his name on the idea that the atmosphere itself could move the world, standing inside a glass monument to the narrative that had replaced it. If this kind of documented, uncomfortable history is what you come here for, hit subscribe. Every claim in this video is sourced, verifiable, and checkable. Because the real history, when you follow it far enough, is always stranger than the version they cleaned up for the textbook. But I want to leave you with the question I cannot answer. Not as speculation, as a genuine, open, historical problem. The Royal Commission catalog documented 100,000 objects from 14,000 exhibitors. The University of Chicago study confirmed that 89% of British innovators chose secrecy over disclosure. The atmospheric railway, a working, passenger-carrying system, was not listed. What else wasn't? Not what conspiracy theory says, not what fringe accounts claim. What technology, verifiably operational in Britain in 1851, simply did not make it through those glass doors? Leave your answer below. I read every single comment. The pipe is still in Swindon.